One room held an entire family and one piece of news. In 1877, Cornelius Vanderbilt died, holding more than the United States Treasury itself reportedly held. 96 years later, 120 of his descendants gathered at his own university and were told not one of them was a millionaire. No fire, no scandal, no single collapse. That reunion is documented, at length, by someone inside the family who had every reason to leave it alone and chose instead to write it all down. Arthur T. Vanderbilt, a descendant himself, spent years reconstructing what happened to the money and published the account in 1989. Of the 120 people in that room, roughly 80 had been born into the name and 40 had married into it, out of 592 Vanderbilts alive that year. Not one of them held $1 million. Not one. That university was itself a Vanderbilt gift. Long before the reunion, long before the fortune ever thinned, the Commodore had endowed it with $1 million, almost exactly a century before his own descendants stood inside a building his own money had built and were told, family by family, that none of them held a fortune of any size at all. The fortune had started with $100, borrowed from a mother in 1810. Cornelius Vanderbilt used it to buy a single passenger boat in New York Harbor and built that boat into a steamship line, and the steamship line into control of the New York Central Railroad, effective command of rail traffic in and out of the largest city in the country. By the time he died, the estate was reported at close to $100 million, a sum contemporary accounts describe as larger than what the United States Treasury itself then held. This account could not independently verify the Treasury's own ledger against that comparison. It is reported here as a widely repeated historical claim, not as a figure this account recomputed. What is not in question is the scale. One working life, built into the largest private fortune the country had recorded. The easy version of what happened next says the money ran out because the heirs were careless, spoiled by inheritance, unfit to manage what they were given. That version is comfortable, and it is not quite what the record shows. William Henry Vanderbilt, called Billy, inherited 87% of the New York Central stock in 1877. He did not waste it. He nearly doubled it to more than $200 million within 8 years. His father had told him, in words the family repeated for generations, "Any fool can make a fortune. It takes a man of brains to hold on to it." But holding on required one more decision the Commodore himself had made and never had to repeat. Keep the capital concentrated, in one steward, undivided. Billy's own death broke that pattern. The controlling stake split between two sons instead of staying with one. Nobody voted on it as a philosophy. It was simply the ordinary thing a family does with an inheritance. Share it. But that is not what actually failed. Sharing the capital was not the mistake. What changed was what the capital was for. One son ran the railroads, sat on the boards until his own death in 1899. Another retired to yachts and horses. A third took his share and built a house. Not a company. A house. That correction matters because the popular version of this story flattens into nobody worked after the second generation, and the record does not support it that cleanly. The family's own encyclopedic account is specific. Cornelius II was, in its words, by far the most devoted to furthering the family's business, and he ran it until his death. A generation further on, one great-grandson was a financier. Another, Harold Sterling Vanderbilt, stayed associated with the New York Central Railroad even while he was inventing the card game, contract bridge, and racing yachts. Business engagement did not vanish in one generation. It thinned, generation over generation, while status consumption grew to fill the space it left. Here is the part that is easy to miss. None of this required a villain. The same instinct that built the New York Central Railroad, spend to be visibly, credibly dominant, so that rivals and lenders and partners read your position correctly, did not disappear in the second generation. It just changed arenas. What actually turns a fortune-building instinct into a fortune-spending one? In 1973, the economist Michael Spence gave that instinct its name: signaling. A signal only works if it is expensive enough that a competitor without the underlying resource cannot fake it. A railroad monopoly was one kind of expensive, credible signal. A house with 250 rooms is another. The mechanism that won the Commodore control of a city's rail traffic is the same mechanism that one generation later started spending that control into the ground. Because status, unlike a railroad, has no board of directors and no shareholders demanding a return. It only asks whether the display was expensive enough to be believed. Here is what that signaling instinct looked like once it left the ledger and became architecture. George Washington Vanderbilt, the youngest of Billy's sons, took his share of the inheritance and built Biltmore, a house in western North Carolina with 250 rooms, 43 bathrooms, 3 kitchens, on 146,000 acres. It took roughly 1,000 workers, including about 60 stonemasons, 6 years to complete, and a railway spur was built for $80,000 for the sole purpose of moving stone to the site. Nobody was ever going to live in 250 rooms. That was never the point of 250 rooms. 35 of those rooms were guest and family bedrooms. 43 were bathrooms, in an age when most American homes had none. 3 separate kitchens served a family that, at any one gathering, numbered at most a few dozen people. His cousin, Cornelius II, built the Breakers in Newport, Rhode Island, at almost the same time. Roughly 2,000 workers, working in shifts through the night, finishing in 2 years, what a house that size should ordinarily have taken far longer to build. The Breakers, designed by the architect Richard Morris Hunt, cost roughly $7 million to build, more than Biltmore's own construction budget. Biltmore took 6 years. The Breakers took 2. Different speeds, same message. Both houses were, in the strict economic sense, wasteful, bigger than any family could use, staffed by people whose entire job was making idleness look effortless. That waste was not a design flaw, it was the argument itself. A thing everyone can afford proves nothing about the household that owns it. A thing only a handful of families on Earth can afford proves something nobody can fake cheaply. This is not only a Gilded Age story. In 2013, the economists Marianne Bertrand and Adair Morse published research using decades of state-by-state income and spending data, and found that when incomes rise at the top of a state's income distribution, non-rich households in that same state raise the share of their own income spent on visible, status-signaling goods, not spending generally, specifically the visible kind. They called it trickle-down consumption. It comes directly out of savings, and by their estimate, middle-income households would have saved 2.6% more of their income by the mid-2000s at the low end of that range, 3.2% at the high end, had incomes at the top simply grown at everyone else's rate. The mechanism inside that data is the same one running through this whole story. Proximity to higher visible spending resets a household's own baseline for what counts as normal. The identical rival's larger house escalation the Gilded Age chapters of this story describe, now measured as a spending share effect instead of told as an anecdote. What gets crowded out is saving, quiet accumulation, the part of the mechanism that never gets seen and therefore never gets credited. And the effect does not resolve. It is geographically local and ongoing, which means it keeps re-triggering rather than settling into some new equilibrium. No mansion required. No name in a history book required. The same mechanism, running on ordinary paychecks, measured directly right now, not analogized to the Gilded Age, found inside it. What we've been calling a story about careless heirs is not a story about careless heirs. It is a story about what status competition does to concentrated capital once nothing keeps redirecting it back into itself. In 1899, the economist Thorstein Veblen, then at the University of Chicago, published an account of exactly this pattern and gave it a name that survived him: conspicuous consumption. Veblen's account went further than the spending itself. He named a companion behavior, conspicuous leisure. Idleness performed specifically to be seen, a household staffed precisely so that visible effortlessness became the display. A family that employed people whose only function was making leisure look natural was not being wasteful by accident. It was demonstrating a capacity for waste that a poorer household could never convincingly fake. Spending performed specifically to be observed, Veblen wrote, functions as a social ranking system, and the households inside it are not competing against a fixed target. They are competing against each other, continuously, and the target moves every time somebody's ballroom gets bigger. There is no ceiling written into that competition. Yesterday's most expensive house becomes tomorrow's baseline. The only way to stop escalating is to stop competing, and stopping looks, to everyone still inside the system, exactly like losing. This is the darker version of the correction from earlier. Cornelius II did stay at the business, ran the railroads, sat on the boards until 1899. He was not lazy, and by any real measure, neither were most of his relatives. What thinned across the generations was not effort. It was the fraction of the family's attention, and capital still pointed at compounding, against the fraction pointed at being seen. Every generation, a little more of the second, a little less of the first, and nobody had to make one dramatic bad decision for that ratio to move. The ordinary, unremarkable choice, repeated, was the mechanism. Splitting an estate among heirs, letting each pursue a project, nothing anyone in the room would ever have called reckless. The Commodore's own rise ran on the identical wiring, being legibly, credibly dominant in shipping, and then in rail, was itself a competitive signal aimed at rivals, lenders, and partners. Proof of command that a smaller operator could not fake. His descendants did not invent a new psychology. They pointed the same one at a different field, where the competition was Gilded Age society instead of market share, and where nothing on the other end was compounding. Concentrated capital behaves like a coal seam, dense, slow-burning, powerful for exactly as long as it stays compressed. Split it 100 ways and light 100 small fires instead, and each one is bright enough to be seen from the street. None of them last as long as the seam would have. The Commodore's own warning was never really about brains. It was about compression. And compression is not a trait a family inherits. It is a discipline a family either keeps re-choosing, generation after generation, or quietly stops choosing, one ordinary decision at a time. No fire, no scandal, no single collapse. 100 years of ordinary choices, each one reasonable, alone. Alone, from a mother, in 1810. A railroad, a warning about brains, not luck. A split between two sons after one funeral. A house nobody could fill. Then another house nobody could fill. Workers by the 1,000. Rooms by the 100. Nobody counting the cost, because the cost was the point. A room in 1973. 120 people standing in it. Not one of them a millionaire. Spence named the mechanism. Veblen named it in 1899. Economists are still finding it. Right now, smaller money. No mansions. No name in a history book yet. Just a household somewhere, deciding what it can afford to be seen spending. What does it cost this year to still look like winning?